leaving a job, leaving a city, moving, COVID, figuring out what I was going to do next, and then eventually ending the relationship too. But that turned into feeling like, who gives a shit about macros? Like, I did not care about tracking my food. It felt so inconsequential. I was like, protein, what? Like, I have my whole life hanging in the balance here. And the last thing I want to think about is like whether I hit a goal of 150 grams of protein for the day. And I kind of started to resent that. All the things I had learned from previously working with a coach myself, and just was kind of looking at it like, why does any of this matter? And if I could go back and tell that version of me one thing, and this is where I say this is important because this is an underpinning, like a foundational theme of the way I look at coaching inside of the Fitness FYX, the way I think about it for myself, but also the way that I lead our clients, is that my fitness and nutrition could have been and should have been, not that I want to play coulda, woulda, shoulda, but everything to me at that time.
Let's link up with Krysta on the Fix. She's a wellness coach with a focus on mental well-being and physical strength.
Hello, FYX listeners. Welcome back to our latest episode of the FYX podcast. I'm your host, Krysta Huber, and if you're new here, welcome. I am so excited to have you tune into the show today for a very special episode because, first of all, the fact that it's October already, I feel like we blinked. I kept saying, oh, summer's not over until the official first day of fall, and now here we are. September's come and gone. We're into October, and we are very much into the fall season. I happen to love the fall season and love the month of October. It's one of my favorite times to be at the beach because I feel like it's just quiet, peaceful, super underrated. Not as many people are around here, but October is a really significant month for the Fitness FYX. And in fact, the very day that this episode drops, we are celebrating 4 years of the Fitness FYX. 4 years of supporting hundreds of women and men in supporting their health, transforming their confidence, really changing their lives, the way they see themselves, how they feel, how they show up on a daily basis from the inside out. And if you're not new to this show, you know that I like to reflect, and I've been doing a lot of that this year for a few different reasons. One, entering a new decade, turning 30 back in May, I did a list, a big long list over the course of a few episodes and on my Instagram stories where I talked about all of the lessons that I learned in my 20s that I plan to carry with me in my 30s. And the month of October is really significant and a time that I often reflect because it was the month that I'm calling it the official start of the Fitness FYX, although I had like clients on the side and that sort of thing, like leading up to this date. But it was when my website officially launched. And I feel like that just kind of announcement of it being like, hey, we have this website, I'm now taking new clients, etc., became officially official on social media on October 3rd. And October 2nd is what would have been, had I chosen a different path about 4 years ago, a little over 4 years ago now at this point, would have been my 4th wedding anniversary. And for those of you who do know me and know my story, I'm going to get into a little bit more of my story in the rest of this conversation. It's been a while since I've shared it. We do have new listeners to the show, new listeners, new people who are visiting my Instagram page. And this is a pinned post on my profile because I think it's so important to understand where I've been because it influences the way that I coach. And because if you've listened to my last couple of episodes, especially my last few solo episodes, I love to find the fitness and nutrition analogy inside other things that happen in life, because guess what, you guys, they are one and the same. And if there is one piece of advice I could give anybody ever when it comes to owning your fitness and nutrition, I'm going to give you like 4 pieces of advice today in honor of 4 years, but something that I think is just, I'll say it, if I know nothing about you and I know nothing about your goals, other than that, maybe you want to improve your relationship with food and maybe you want to lose a little bit of weight. Your biggest problem is that you're probably putting your fitness and nutrition in one box and the rest of your life in another. So it's kind of ironic, but also a kind of a no-brainer statement that it's easy to find the fitness and nutrition analogies in everything in life, because food is our life and nutrition is our life. It's literally what sustains you to be able to show up, have the energy, be the person you want to be. It's social, it's love, it's so many things. So for as much as I'm like, oh yeah, I love to find the fitness and nutrition analogy, if you think about food and you think about your relationship with food the way I do, it shouldn't really necessarily come as a surprise. And I like to think, of course, as a coach, that I have a very good outlook on how we think about food. And I wouldn't be here right now recording this podcast had I chosen a different path a few months prior to October 2nd of 2020, but we'll call it about 4 years ago. If you're listening to this the day that this episode drops, is literally like 4 years in a day. And every time I get to this date, every single year, I think about, wow, my life looks so different than it would have had I made a very different decision. And I'm so glad for the decision that I made. Quick backstory on it. I realized that I just wasn't in the relationship that I wanted to be in. And I don't think he was either. But had I not been the one to be like, hey, this is a right for either one of us, I think that it would have happened and we would have gone through with it and made the most of it. But why just make the most of something? Nobody should settle on both sides. He shouldn't have settled. I shouldn't have settled. And we haven't. And we've gone on to lead separate lives. And truly, I bring this up because if you had told 2020 or even 2019 Krysta, because that's really where a lot of this story of the Fitness FYX starts. I was previously working in group fitness, thought that would be my path, pictured myself eventually owning my own gym, and quickly realized after about a year and a half of making the transition from being a corporate girly with a desk job, working in finance, thinking about maybe going into advertising, marketing, something like that, I made the leap to full-time manage a fitness studio in Charlotte, North Carolina. And after about a year and a half of doing it, I was like, I'm really burnt out. And I don't know that I love this as much as I thought I did. Had some differences of opinion with management and had a different vision for where I thought my position as that manager would eventually go. And again, same way I'm talking about this romantic relationship, it just wasn't aligned. I learned so much from it. I learned a ton about myself that it actually took me probably like 3 years to realize I even learned those things about myself in that time. But I wouldn't have traded any of these things for the world. But that decision to then leave that job became the catalyst for everything that would happen to me between the end of 2019 through 2020, which was transparently, I always keep it real here with you all, a very trying and tumultuous time of my life. I was really lost. I was really confused. I felt like I didn't have a purpose anymore. I didn't recognize who I was when I looked at myself in the mirror. And I can sit here now and say that I'm so glad I had that experience, because it has allowed me to bring a different level of empathy to coaching. One, because just like very objectively, I went through a period in that time where I lost a bunch of weight because initially I stopped working out and like just didn't have an appetite, had really bad insomnia, and just so much stress of the decisions that I was making at the time between leaving a job, leaving a city, moving, COVID, figuring out what I was going to do next, and then eventually ending the relationship too. But that turned into feeling like, who gives a shit about macros? Like, I did not care about tracking my food. It felt so inconsequential. I was like, protein, what? Like, I have my whole life hanging in the balance here. And the last thing I want to think about is like whether I hit a goal of 150 grams of protein for the day. And I kind of started to resent that. All the things I had learned from previously working with a coach myself, and just was kind of looking at it like, why does any of this matter? And if I could go back and tell that version of me one thing, and this is where I say this is important, because this is an underpinning, like a foundational theme of the way I look at coaching inside of the Fitness FYX, the way I think about it for myself, but also the way that I lead our clients, is that my fitness and nutrition could have been and should have been, not that I want to play coulda, woulda, shoulda, but everything to me at that time. Because maintaining structure, maintaining consistency through something like tracking food, maintaining routine through things like walking, yoga, like lifting weights, working out, whatever, just some kind of movement, would have allowed me to better handle the challenging things that I was facing. But I just, again, felt so burnt out and just wanted to like melt into like a puddle. I felt like I had so much shame for being this person who seemed like not even 6 months prior, she had everything figured out. And I felt like I just like shattered this perception that I not only created for myself, but then like tried to portray on social media. And I let all of that get inside my own head. And one of the reasons why I wish I could go back and tell myself, hey, like having the structure of your fitness and nutrition routine would have helped you get through that, is because just black and white, I wound up eventually gaining a lot of weight and really resented the process of fitness. Like looking at it as a journey, it felt very like bullshit to me. And I know that's not an eloquent way to say it, but that's really how I felt, because it just felt so inconsequential at the time when I was in a really dark place mentally and emotionally. And I just wish that I had the knowledge, because I knew it was true, but my reality was just like, I was so down. I couldn't get myself to see this, even though my family members were encouraging me to be this way. Like I had all the support in the world. So I don't say this for any kind of pity or anything like that, but I just couldn't get out of my own way. Now I can look back, of course, hindsight's 2020, and say, I'm really glad that that happened, because I have so much empathy for the person who just feels like it's actually really hard to lose the weight. I eventually went on to gain like 45 pounds over the course of a 6-month period. And I've really spent the latter half of the last 2.5 years kind of battling what a comfortable weight is for my physique, not wanting to go back to the person who was doing like pre-2019, 6 days of HIIT workouts, eating 1,400 calories, just constantly moving. I really understood macros, and I'm so glad I had that learning experience. But what I didn't understand was how to not diet. I was always in this pursuit of trying to diet versus not diet and figure out how to maintain it. So I would say, if you've listened to my podcast for a while and you've ever thought about working with a coach, I want you to know I'm the coach for you. If you are the person who feels like you've tried it all, including macro tracking, you've tried to understand how to eat more protein, and you still feel like it's not working for you. And guess what? The reason why it's not working for you, and this is what I can say from that personal experience, it's not working for you because it has nothing to do with your fitness and nutrition. It has everything to do with everything else in your life that's making it feel so difficult for you to prioritize your fitness and nutrition. That's making you tell yourself this story that it is challenging to get to where you want to go, that you'll never be the person you were before, or you won't be the person that you envision for yourself. And none of that's actually true. Using fitness and nutrition, using macro tracking, using following a specific strength training program, those things are tools to help you get there. But the real work happens. My clients who have that true transformation, and I want that for every single client that we work with and connect with inside of the Fitness FYX. But the people who really have that are the people who make that identity shift. I say this to clients often. I say this in episodes. I've probably said this like 10 times in multiple different episodes this year, because this has just been on my mind so much this year in particular, because I really feel like I've grown exponentially in the last 12 months. And because like I said, I can look back on these things. I'm like, yes, I'm glad I went through that, but like, here's a really specific reason why. Of course, it's because I understand what it's like to lose and gain weight and want to lose a significant amount of weight. But what I also really understand is that there is this required identity shift. And when you can have this identity shift that you are just the person who automatically shows up prioritizing their health, no matter what life throws your way, it is actually going to be easy. I have no, what I described a few moments ago as resentment towards tracking my food, thinking like, who gives a shit about protein, at a time when it felt like a bomb had been dropped on my life that I voluntarily dropped myself, which really messed with me in my head, because I was like, I can't feel bad for myself when I created this for myself. What I realized through that is it's more about being able to show yourself that you track your food not because it's a means to some end, but because it's a sign of respect for yourself. It's a way for you to remind yourself that when you do that thing, in this example, food tracking, you just automatically feel good, because the byproduct is that, yes, you lose weight. Yes, you maintain the results you desire. Yes, you build muscle. Yes, you gain strength. But the underlying byproduct is that you're just continuing to keep a promise to yourself. You're maintaining the commitment you set out to do. And that is ultimately going to build your confidence. It increases the integrity that you have as a person, but specifically the integrity that you have in your relationship with yourself, which is one that is just, it will forever be the most valuable relationship that you ever have in your life. And now fast forward to the whole past year, back half of 2023, all through 2024 so far, I've realized in thinking about like, what are some things that this year has shown me, thrown my way, the challenges I faced, the successes I've also had too. What can I take away from them? And we love a list. So I made a list of 4 things to keep this kind of succinct. And yes, in honor of 4 years of the Fitness FYX. But as I was thinking about this, I kind of realized that like this year was the year I entered my so-called woo-woo era. And as the universe would have it, as I was having this thought to myself and collecting my thoughts to sit down to record this episode, and I opened up Instagram, I was looking at some stories, and I was setting up my microphone and making sure Bean was nice and calm, which she is. And I opened this story to an article from The Atlantic. And if you've been following the news recently, if you haven't, I would encourage you to go check out this information that I'm about to share. I'm going to keep it really short because it's somewhat of an aside, but I'm going to read it to you guys. There was a Senate meeting with a presentation with RFK and a few other people in the nutrition and wellness space that I really respect: doctors, wellness influencers, people that they know their shit, people I've even had on this podcast, and people that I follow because I really respect what they have to say. And interestingly, there was this article in The Atlantic, like I mentioned, and I'm going to read it to you guys. And it was titled "The Woo Woo Caucus Meets." And then underneath it, like the little subtitle, it says, RFK Jr.'s appearance at a quote unquote health and nutrition event hosted by a Trump ally showcased a congruence of crunchy and cranky. Now, this was especially ironic to me because I was just having this thought about entering my woo-woo era. And I'm going to say I have no issue with being in my woo-woo era. Health and wellness should not be woo-woo though. So I kind of like caught myself and stopped myself for being like, why am I even labeling this as woo-woo when, yeah, it's woo-woo maybe because the 4 lessons I'm going to share with you here are not very tangible, and they're not the, hey, track your food, the, hey, eat this amount of protein, hey, get this amount of sleep. And yet a lot of the information that was shared during this Senate meeting, during this conference, was very practical. And it was talking about the issues with our food supply. And I could do a whole other podcast episode on that. And if that's ever of an interest, if you guys want my thoughts on that, I'd love to share it. So let me know. But if we are going to put health and wellness in a box called woo-woo, I am here to say, like, I will proudly be sitting in that box and wave that flag very proudly. And I thought it was especially ironic because, again, just to give more context of my story and how I got here, I thought I wanted to be a journalist. If you had asked 18-year-old Krysta, probably even like 16-year-old Krysta, because I had this idea in high school, me throughout college, I went to a school specifically because I knew that's what I wanted to major in, and they had a journalism school, I would have told you that I was going to be a news anchor on TV. So to sit here now and know what type of work I do and know how strongly I feel about taking care of my health and my wellness and being that leader and being that example, I find it so funny that there's an article in a publication that if you had asked Krysta like 6, 7, 10 years ago, I would have told you it'd be so cool to be a reporter for The Atlantic. And I would have told you it would have been such an amazing opportunity to have a job like that. And then I go read an article like this and I'm like, I would not have lasted a few months knowing what my values are and then seeing this type of information be reported on. It's just funny to me that I can sit here now today almost 4 years into the podcast too. And I call that like the podcast itself is like my tie to my journalism skills at heart at work. But it's just funny how I was sitting here labeling myself as being like, okay, I'm kind of in this woo woo era. And then I read this headline and I was like, this is not woo woo. So I caught myself being like, wait a second. We're not woo woo. We just give a shit about our bodies, what we put into them, the fact that we want to be here for a long time, the fact that we, in wanting to be here for a long time and thinking about this concept of longevity, want to live a full and healthy life well into 70s, 80s, having a good quality of life, fighting off disease, and just being able to move and enjoy all the things that we want out of life. That's not woo-woo. That should be everybody's priority. And I see this so often with the women that we work with in particular, because most of you, like myself, and this is something I'm going to get into, you have this perception that you need to get everything done and you need to be everything to everyone and you need to be the best. And yet you have this massive exception about not being the best when it comes to taking care of your health. And it makes no sense when you really think about it, because if you truly embodied this desire to be the absolute best, guess what? You would put your fitness and nutrition as the absolute non-negotiable. I'm talking like it being the priority level of your kids, work, your partner, all the other things that you allow to get in the way. And I do not say this from a place of like, I figured it out. I say this from a place of going back to the girl I was describing in 2019 and 2020, someone who allowed her life circumstances, the chaos, the confusion, the uncertainty of those life circumstances to put her health and fitness on the back burner when that's actually what I needed for myself the most. So that is like my Roman Empire, to be able to help women see that if you are looking to do it all, you can keep doing it all, but you'd be a lot better at doing it all if you actually took care of yourself. And if that has to be called woo-woo, proudly waving the woo-woo flag. So with that, here are my 4 big takeaways in year 4 of the Fitness FYX, where I've grown myself as a professional, and also with the conversations and the themes I'm seeing that keep coming up for my clients on a regular basis. And like I mentioned, most of these takeaways are much more about your mindset and your thought process and your priorities versus the, hey, you need to eat X amount of protein to be able to get to your certain goals. Now, yes, you do and should be thinking about how much protein you're consuming. But what I've come to realize, especially as clients get into places where they are seeing a ton of progress and then maybe they stall out for a little bit and they're like, hey, I'm doing all these things right and I'm not getting the results that I want. What's actually going on here? That's where I often find us leaning more into peeling back the layers beyond like, what are the choices that you're making on a day-to-day basis? And can we talk about how you're talking to yourself up here? Are you giving the scale a whole lot of power? Are you fixated on being like, well, I've been doing these workouts, following my nutrition this consistently. Okay, I know last week maybe I wasn't the best with like this dinner that I had out, but like I'm putting in all this effort. Like, why am I not getting what I want? Half the time we resolve that sentiment by being like, wait a second, sister, let's zoom out and look at your progress over the course of the last 4, 6, 8, 12 months. And it's like, hello, you lost 10, 15, 20 pounds. So why let this 2-week window of where, yes, you feel like you're crushing it, define your self-worth and define your perception of making no progress, when the reality is when we change the scale, when we change the scope and the timeline of what we're looking at, you're absolutely killing it. And you're a totally different person than the person that you were before. So that said, now that I've like built up this list, I'm going to give, let me just dive right into it. The first one has a lot to do with what I'm describing about me talking to 2019 and 2020 Krysta to 2024 Krysta. And so there's been some moments along the way where I've had to tell myself this mantra a few times. And number one is, even if it doesn't make sense to you right now, you will figure it out. Obviously, with the story that I shared, at the time I had so much uncertainty in my life. The Fitness FYX was created out of total uncertainty. So I did figure it out. But if you told me that 4 years ago, I would have laughed really hard and be like, no way, I can't see a way out of this. And then that was tested for me again between the back half of 2023 into 2024, when I was let go from the last part-time, full-time / part-time position I had working in the fitness industry locally, teaching group fitness classes, managing studios, doing some marketing and social media for another company that I really influenced and helped grow for the first 2.5 years of their business. And it was a surprise. I didn't expect it to happen. And without going into too much detail on what happened, because honestly, I don't even really know, got a phone call one day that we were no longer going to be working together and I was no longer part of the team. I was totally shocked. I knew that being there wouldn't be my forever, but that wasn't the timeline that I kind of anticipated, in which I would eventually make the Fitness FYX my main gig. So not only is this year an exciting year, because heading into year 4, this past year is technically the first full year that the Fitness FYX has been my 100% focus, and that if I wanted to be super technical about it, this was like the first year where entrepreneurship was like totally my entire MO. But I say that to say I still considered myself an entrepreneur for the last 3 years prior to this. But it was unexpected. And at the time I was like, okay. But what was so exciting was the fact that I wasn't afraid of that uncertainty anymore, because I got this phone call. I freaked out for a minute, made a few phone calls, was like, what the heck? And then I immediately went back to the scared old me from 2020, who was getting her website set up, trying to post content on social media to figure out how she would take clients, getting nutrition certifications, figuring out what I wanted the Fitness FYX to look like, how I wanted to coach, what I wanted to do to support people. And I figured it out and I did it anyway. That wasn't without a lot of bumps and stops and starts and moments of like, is this really going to work? A lot of long days, a lot of working 18 plus hours on a regular basis, to now getting to this point where it's like the last 3 months, I've just kind of had the chance to like take a step back and be like, I'm at a place where this feels so automatic to me because it feels so right. And I would have never gotten to this point had I not been through those challenges. And now it's like really cool because I can say, hey, my perspective and my knowledge and what I've been through has prepared me so much for this moment that I feel like I'm just getting started. And I never thought I could get to this point. And now that I'm at this point, I feel like I'm just getting started. And it's so refreshing and energizing and just no better word for it. It's really cool and really exciting. And the way that I've gotten to this place this year in being able to say, hey, like you're going to be fine and you're going to figure it out. And to also be able to like take these moments to reflect and take a step back and think through these things has actually come from making a commitment to be more present. So that's number 2. I've done a few episodes about this. I've had a lot of support in this department, in particular with working with my incredible, amazing transformation coach, Oliver, who came on the show. If you guys did not check out the episode that we did together a couple months back, I will link it down in the show notes because it's such a good one. And he's just incredible. Like seriously, I owe a lot to him in what he's helped me, how he's helped me see myself, what he's helped me realize I already have inside me. And in being more present, it just kind of helps you recognize like, hey, like, what are you doing all of this for? And let's tie that back to you, the listener, thinking about something like tracking your food, thinking about something like making the time to go to the gym. If the idea of that sounds like, oh, I don't want to do this. If that is like something you loathe, the thought of that is like loathing to you, this is where getting more present is so powerful. Because if the whole reason that you're doing it is to actually feel better, not just see a certain number on the scale, it's going to be easier to stick to on the days that you just absolutely don't feel like it. After 7 years of being on and off with tracking my food, I can finally say that I'm at a point, and this is something that I hope, as if you're listening to this as a client or a potential client, my goal for you is to help you speed up what I'm about to say and not have it take 7 years for you to feel like this. But I feel like I have so much ease with food tracking, with getting to the gym, because it's just like, yeah, I'm going to do it. And I know I'm going to get it done. And it doesn't feel like any kind of chore. And I want that for every one of you, because I know the benefits of what that then does give you in terms of the results that you're looking for. But I can guarantee you that they'll stick if you get to this place where you feel like this is just inherently who I am and this is just inherently what I do. Not to mention even little things, like so many of you out there deal with bloat and indigestion, and you feel like you are just inflamed. The topic of gut health has become like such a big one in the last year and a half. Chances are the reason why you're that way is because you're not present. And I mean, down to the moments of you actually eating a meal. And if you're on your phone, or even if you're watching TV, that's not as bad, but you're rushing, you're eating fast, you're not paying attention to whether you're chewing your food. That right there could solve like half of the issues that you may be facing when you say that you're bloated. But what does that all come back to? My point is that it comes back to just being present and paying attention to like how you feel in a certain moment. And for me, the other component of being present outside of like my fitness and nutrition, just more so of like having fun, recognizing that in the last year of so many things in my schedule changing, of the Fitness FYX becoming my sole focus, of no longer being the person who's like running to train a client here, teach a class there, have this class on this day, then fit a Zoom call in at a certain time, and just feeling like I was all over the place and just trying to do everything I could to get to the point where I am right now, where I have a lot more control. It's like, okay, this moment arrived. You have this control. Enjoy it, do something with it. And that's looked like learning how to golf, picking up new hobbies, intentionally going to the beach on walks every single morning, and recognizing that there doesn't need to be any guilt associated with that, because that is what I've wanted to create for myself for the last 4 years. And now feeling like I'm just getting started with it just feels like there's so much opportunity around that. And it feels so good to know that this is only just the beginning, even though it felt like such a climb to get to this place. And that's when you know that you feel like your absolute best self, regardless of what the scale says, regardless of what you might see in the mirror on maybe having not the best body image day. There's just like contentment with that. My third one ties into what I was just talking through about having the crazy schedule. And this is for all of you out there who are busy people. And I know there's a lot of you who feel like you never have enough time. You do have time. You have the time to get the workout in. You have the time to meal prep your food. You have the time to slow down and relax and do absolutely nothing. I put up a story about this on my Instagram like maybe 3-4 weeks ago. And I did a poll and I asked, like, do you know how to chill? And then as a follow-up story to that, I said, but I mean like really chill. I mean like not chill and simultaneously scroll your phone or anything like that. I mean like really chill to the point where you're like, you're doing nothing. You can feel your mind is blank. You're present in the moment right in front of you. You don't feel like you need to fill up the time with going for a walk or even like doing something. I mean, just like sitting on your couch. And that is the makings of meditation. And so many people were like, OMG, this is so me. Like I convinced myself that I'm relaxing and chilling. But meanwhile, I'm like casually sending a couple of emails and doom scrolling on my phone. And like, I'm not actually like totally decompressing. You can find that time when you recognize that it is important to you. And it is so integral, to you getting the results that you desire, to you getting to the place of what I was saying about feeling like this can be easy for you. And yes, it is a lot easier for me to say this as somebody who is not in a phase of life where she has kids yet. And I know I have a lot of clients who have kids. I know I have listeners who have kids. So trust me when I say I do understand this, not firsthand, but I have had a lot of lessons And a lot of people who have been able to show me this and hear it from them and really listen to them and understand that like what's actually missing and the reason why you think you don't have time. And this is something I went through. And you guys, I went through this between 2022 and 2023. I would feel like it was one of my worst years with my relationship with working out. And the irony was I spent like 15 hours a day in a gym and I would still convince myself that I didn't have time when the friction of being able to get there was easier than it's ever been. It's even easier than it is right now, where I now work from home and from my co-working space. But I was just so convinced that like I couldn't do XYZ with my own fitness until I got the Fitness FYX to a certain place, until all of my clients were taken care of, until. And you may be doing the same thing, whether it's with your career or certain goals that you have financially or with taking care of other people in your life. And when you realize that you do have the time, what you're actually realizing for yourself is it's the whole ditch the all or nothing mindset, the 15-minute workout, the 20-minute workout, the 20-minute walk, the 10-minute walk, you walking on your walking pad while you're also, if you really need to, simultaneously sending emails, all of that, you can fit it in. It's just a matter about getting creative with it. And if you continue to tell yourself the story that you don't have time, you will never have time. And it seems so obvious to say it like that, but it's really true. It just comes down to you giving yourself permission to look at things differently. You think you don't have time based on this like routine and structure and schedule that does not make sense for you. It makes sense for the 22-year-old person who really doesn't have a whole lot of other things going on in their life. And you don't have to, that's not who you are. So you don't have to hold yourself to that. There's a standard that makes more sense for you in the context of exactly the circumstances that you're in right now in this particular season of life. And if you feel like you're in this particular season of life, whatever that looks like for you, and you feel stuck, that is where coaching comes in to be so powerful, because this is me tying this all the way back to how I opened this episode in saying that anytime that I've struggled personally and I've seen clients struggle personally with being able to see the results that they want, it's not because of you not knowing what to do. I did an episode on this a couple weeks ago. It's because you're letting the outside things in your life trump your priorities when it comes to taking care of your meal prep, taking care of getting to the gym, tracking your food on a regular basis, etc. Now bring this home. Number 4, takeaway from 4th year in business. And this 100% applies to anybody who might be in a tough spot when it comes to the number they see on the scale. The more attention and the more power you give to something, the more it will be true. Your mind is a powerful thing. I see this more with the negative than I do with the positive. And we are often wired to look for the negative, so that makes sense. And I see this a lot, and I do this myself, when you're being really consistent, you're hitting your protein, getting your steps in, you're going to the gym 3 days a week, you're working on managing your stress, you're trying to get X number of hours of sleep, you're doing it all, you're doing all the things. And then you look at the scale and it doesn't say the number that you expected to say based on us being in agreement that you're putting in 100% effort. And this is where the real woo-woo comes together, because so often when I was a younger coach and an earlier coach with less experience, I would kind of like panic when this happened with clients and be like, oh my God, what am I missing? I'm not teaching them the right thing. And what I've come to learn now is it's actually the fixation that we have on, hey, here's the work I'm doing, so therefore I expect this exact outcome and I expect it as fast as possible. It's that attitude and then us giving this power to this number on the scale that's preventing us from getting to where we want to go. And I know that to be true because what do I usually do in that situation? I ask a client not to weigh themselves for like a week or two. And every single time after that week or two, where I remind them, let's just focus on you celebrating the fact that you're continuing to take care of yourself by checking all of these things off. And you're doing more than just checking them off. You're embracing them. Again, your identity, you're saying like by doing these regularly, regardless of how you feel about it, you are committing to the fact that this is just simply who you are. What happens after that week or two when you don't weigh yourself? The scale goes down. Voila. But really, so the challenge is, what if you actually gave more attention and power to the positive. How might you actually get the results you want even faster? By looking for the good things. And that's not in the name of toxic positivity. That's in the name of you recognizing everything that you're doing right and giving yourself a pat on the back for that. But then also knowing that, yeah, I can hit you with the science. We're made up of mostly water. For the girls out there, your hormones change monthly and they go through a specific cycle within that month. And sometimes you can check all the boxes and do all the right things, and you just might not get the exact outcome that you want immediately within that time frame. But that's where we zoom out. That's where we think about why we're even doing this in the first place. Because if we're always connected to our why, it's going to be a lot easier to handle it no matter what comes your way. Now, it wouldn't be a 4-year birthday celebration if I didn't do something to give back for all of you. One of the reasons why I love acknowledging these types of anniversaries is because I want to do something for you, the listeners of the show. And we also have our 4-year anniversary for the FYX podcast itself in December. So stay tuned for some fun plans then too. But I would love to give 4 of you a full day of eating audit. So what I need you to do is track your food for a couple days if you're not already doing it. And I'm going to pick 4 people where I will give you a little taste of exactly what we offer inside of the Fitness FYX program. I'll pull up your food tracking. I'll give you some feedback. I'll give you a suggested set of macros. And I'm also going to ask you some questions about what does your routine look like? What are your responsibilities? What demands do you have on you at work, home, etc., so that I can give you a quick rundown of what type of plan I would set for you, knowing what you want to achieve. The way I'm going to pick those 4 people is if you leave a review on the podcast, screenshot it, send it to me, and I'm going to then pick 4 winners, and I will connect with you directly to give you the details on how we're going to do your full day of eating audit. So the day that this episode drops, I will have a post and a bunch of stories up about it too. So you can just respond right to my stories. If you're not following me on Instagram, make sure you do at the Krysta Huber, as well as at the fix.officialpod. And I hope you guys like this episode. Here's to another 4 years and many beyond that of being here, showing up every single week, supporting more clients, and just continuing to spread this mission of realizing that we don't have to just do it all. You can do it all and do it better. With that, from wherever you're listening from, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will catch you guys next week.